Hey race fans, my name is Alyssa Rowe and I am here with Mike Donald. We're here to talk about Mike's history in racing and to see where he's headed now and for the future. So thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for asking me. I was telling you earlier that I've been doing this for more than 30 years and I've probably interviewed hundreds of people, but probably less than 5 times someone has asked to interview me, so this is quite the role reversal. So.
Yes, it'll be fun.
But I'm honored that you asked me, and it means a lot. I've known you for a while. We've been friends for a long time, and thank you very much. It means a lot.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to do it because you've been more than willing to talk anytime I've wanted to interview you. So there you go.
Well, thank you again. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about your involvement in the racing industry. You know, you've been involved in a lot of different areas. Where did it all start? How did you get started? Yeah,
it started way back. You know, your father was telling me earlier that he's old school. I'm old school too, you know. Actually, a lot of people don't know this, but I actually raced a little bit myself back in 1986.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I actually raced street stocks in 1986, and I raced a full season in 86, and then I came back and raced a part-time season in street stocks in 1988. Of course, down at Natural Bridge Speedway down in Virginia, where I'm from. But then, Alyssa, I learned quickly, I mean, I had a few top 10s, things like that, but I learned quickly that I was better talking about it, writing about it, than driving. And so I understand what you go through as a driver, and I did okay, but driving wasn't my thing. It's not everybody's thing. But after, you know, I played around as a driver a little bit, I actually went to work for my hometown newspaper. And the sports editor there was actually my high school English teacher. Excuse me. And so he knew that you know, he knew my writing ability. I could write very well. And so he hired me there. It was called the News Gazette. It was a newspaper in Lexington, Virginia. And I became the sports reporter, primarily covering auto racing. Okay. And so I started, you know, as far as dirt track, Natural Bridge Speedway, East Side Speedway. And the longer I was involved with it, then they started sending me to some of the local NASCAR races. And that's when, I don't know if you remember Rick Mast, when he drove in the Xfinity and Cup Series. He's from Rockbridge, Mass. I've known him for years. And so they started sending me to Martinsville and Bristol and Charlotte and different tracks like that, covering you know, the NASCAR races. And I got to know a lot of the NASCAR drivers and went to South Boston and different tracks like that. And I did that for a few years, and then as I continued to cover Natural Bridge Speedway, the promoter there, they always called him Whitey Taylor. His name was Donald Taylor, but Whitey Taylor's blonde hair guy. Yeah. And he wanted me to come on as the public relations director for the Speedway. And I went into that, and then it's just continued on ever since. Right. But I did a lot of writing, public relations. I didn't even actually start announcing until about 2008, 2009. Really? Right. And what's interesting was the sports editor, who was my high school English teacher, was also a public address announcer, and he had done a lot of Division I football, basketball, so you know there was a connection there. But it started on a local level, and it broadened out into NASCAR, and so now 30 some years later, I think I've announced it like 45 different. Wow. I think my last count, I think it was 45 different racetracks. I've announced that. I have lost count of the number of series I've announced for. World of Outlaws, Lucas. Do you remember the Kings of Dirt? Yep. I announced a couple of those races. Then got into promoting, and now the radio station. But it started with the hometown newspaper and Natural Bridge Speedway. Wow. And Rick Mast NASCAR. That's where it started. Wow, that's a journey. Yeah, it is. It's been. But I jokingly tell people, and Beth's off camera, and my younger brother was telling me the other day, he said, Mike, I'm jealous. He said, all the different things you've done and traveled and all the race car drivers that you know. But Alyssa, I tell him, I said, I can take all of that, and you know what all of that and $7 will get me?
Yeah.
A small cup of coffee at Starbucks. So it's not been for the money, but I've paid some bills in racing, but it's been for the experience. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's a dream.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So from announcing to promoting to driving, what was your favorite title? What did you like the best?
You know, I think, you know, I go back and I look over my entire career, and I think my favorite part of my career was when I was the announcer for the Steel Block Bandit Late Model Series. Yes. Your father raced, your father Will Rowe raced in some of those races. And that was probably my favorite time of my career.
Really?
Yeah, the Steel Block Bandits, and you know Danny Wilson from Turf, you know, he's a phenomenal promoter, did a great job. And that's when I got into the announcing, was like 2008, 2009, and that was my first announcing gig, traveling with a traveling series. And you know, when Danny was on his game, that was a phenomenal series, and it was nothing. One weekend you're in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Maryland, West Virginia, and a lot of people referred to it as like the World of Outlaws for Steel Block late models.
Right.
But that was like a magical time. When you go back and you look at some of those people like Calvin Davis and Walter Nichols and Butch Mayo and Greg Keister and Cliff Dove and Danny and Patty, and those people, how they gelled, and just to be able to travel and meet so many of those different drivers. And I mean, if you go back, listen, you think about the drivers who were in that series. I don't know when else you could probably assemble those drivers on a racetrack at the same time.
Right.
It was like the who's who. And that series, Alyssa, got so big that there were super late model drivers kind of defecting over to race with the Steel Block Bandits.
Yeah.
It was just, but that was just an awesome time. You almost kind of felt like a rock star because you were in and out of hotels, this state, this state.
Yeah, oh my gosh, living the dream.
But I'm not sure I'd want to do it now. I'm a little advanced in age now, but no, that was probably my favorite, you know, time in my career was the Steel Block Bandits, the 4 or 5 years that I did that.
Right, that's amazing.
And I've had lasting friendships. You know? Yeah. That's where
great.
I first met your dad and Danny and everyone. Yeah. Yeah.
Good group of people, definitely.
Yeah.
Now, racing has obviously consumed your life for most of your life.
Yes, it has.
Beth, I'm sure, can attest to that.
Yes.
What do you like to do outside of racing?
It's funny, you know, because it's like, you know, I work all week, and then it's so much of the racing. And what are we going to do this weekend? We're going to go to Martinsville Speedway. That's like my escape from racing is racing. But no, I mean, when we get away from racing, we will do things like, you know, we like to go and listen to live music, and we'll go to other sporting events like, you know, football, basketball, and you know, I've been known to walk around with Beth in some antique malls. No. But while she's looking at dishes and things, you know what I'm looking for at the antique malls? The old NASCAR collectibles.
Yep.
It's like I can't get it, but you know, different things. But you know, we really enjoy the racing too, and it's something we enjoy together, whether it's dirt track or asphalt, and you know. But no, there's other things I do, but it's like you know how it is. You're so consumed with it that it's almost hard to get away from it.
Yeah, it's a passion. You almost have to do it. Yeah,
it sounds cliche, but you know how people say, you know, it's that racing bug, and once you get it in, you can't get it, and that's true. It's, you know, even if you wanted to, you'll find yourself just sliding back in. You can't help it, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I always make the joke that, you know, we talked earlier about how I was late in my dad's life. Yeah. And for viewers that don't know, my dad had me when he was 42 and my mom was 40. And, you know, he had raced for 20, 25 years at that point. Right. And when I was born, my mom was like, no more, like, we're done going to the races, we're just going to focus on a family. And then here I come, 9 years, you know, 9 years old, we're going racing full time again. And my mom's like, I thought we were done, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's a family thing, and we all go together, and I don't think you can ever get away from it.
No. And he's got a great daughter, and he's got a great driver. So yeah. But I wanted to say, you know, I didn't want to kind of get off script a little bit, but I did want to, you know, offer my condolences to you, your father, and everyone. And obviously, everyone knows that you were scheduled to drive for the Klein family, and of course, you know, Alan Klein, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, passed away unexpectedly. I was able to talk about him and you a little bit on my radio show last night, and but I know that's a sad and heartbreaking situation, but I just wanted to you know, let you know that, you know, I'm aware of that, and we're sorry that happened, but you know, I met him and his wife when you were doing the fire suits with Santa a few months ago. They seemed like nice people.
Yeah, they're great people.
Yeah, and you know, him and Tex Schaefer, it's like two great car owners right there, back to back.
It's a shame.
Yeah.
That's what I said when it happened. You know, you ask yourself why, but you know, they're up there.
Yeah.
Hodnett, Tex Schaefer,
Yes.
Alan, they're all up there
Yeah.
enjoying their time up there.
In a better place.
In a better place.
Yes.
No pain.
You're right.
They're loving it up there.
Right. Exactly.
But,
yeah.
Yeah, but thank you.
Yeah. So I didn't want to get off script, but
Okay.
I didn't want to get through this and not,
okay.
you know, mention that, because
Yeah.
that was you know, was going to be a big thing for you in racing, and you know, so we'll just have to see how it goes, and but I know you'll do great regardless of what
Well,
you do
thank you.
this year.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, let's talk a little bit about social media. So you're pretty big on social media, and the racing industry is really starting to become more and more difficult because of money. It's harder to get sponsors. What do you think, you know, as racers, spectators, promoters, what all do you think that we need to do to improve racing and keep racing alive and well?
Well, you know, and this is one thing I preach a lot. You know, people have got to work together, because, you know, tracks have to work together, promoters have to work together, even teams have to work together. I remember I was announcing a Kings of Dirt late model race at Roaring Knob, and I'm sure you're familiar with Ben Shelton, the announcer, and of course he went on to announce for the World of Outlaw late model series. And I'll never forget, we sat there and we announced that race together. I think Billy Moyer won the race, but afterwards we were sitting there and talking, and I'll never forget, Alyssa, and this is a great thing to tell people. You know, he said, let me draw out this diagram, and he drew a circle, and he started sectioning it off, you know, into sections of pie, you know.
Right.
And he said, okay, now this half over here is, you know, the world, politics and jobs and family. And he kept going, and then there was like one section of pie. He said, no, this is sports. And he said, now we'll section this off. This is the National Football League. This is NBA,
right.
Hockey, baseball. This is NASCAR. And then he drew just a little tiny sliver that you could barely see. And he said, you know what that little tiny sliver is? I'm like, what? He said, that's the dirt track industry. And he says, and believe it or not, if people are outside of that sliver, they don't care about this sliver.
Yeah.
And he said, so these people, whether they're big-time super late model drivers or big-time track owners, they need to come down and realize that outside of that little sliver,
Right.
people don't consider them. He says, now, in order to grow our sliver of pie, we've got to bring those people in.
Right.
And so you've got to effectively promote to bring those people in and build that sliver of pie.
Right.
And
That's a great point.
and so you have to do things like what Danny does with Turn 5.
Yep.
What I'm fortunate enough to do on FM radio. And you know what Race Night does, the Boer family, the Beer Hill Gang. And then of course, you know, you have what you see in the NASCAR world. But working together. But the other thing, I made a post on social media the other day, is race fans, I think, need to stop feeling threatened by the other genres of racing.
Yeah, I agree.
If you're a dirt track fan, don't be threatened by NASCAR.
Right.
Embrace NASCAR. If you're a NASCAR fan, don't be threatened by dirt track. Embrace dirt track.
Right.
And you see what happens when Tony Stewart brings the Gander Outdoor Truck Series to Eldora, and NASCAR and dirt converge on one night.
Right. That's a great race too.
And so if you end up where you might get, and of course the ARCA series is on dirt a couple of times a year, if you could get the Xfinity series or the Cup series eventually on dirt one time and put it together, because I always use the hashtag all race cars matter, you know, all race drivers matter. But it's effective promoting and pulling people into our sliver of the pie to, but it has to be done internally first. You know, track promoters have got to work together.
Yeah.
You know, I had Richard Newcomer and Brett Rose from Hagerstown Speedway, excuse me, on the station last night, and we were talking about the Ultimate Northeast Super Late Model Series at Hagerstown this weekend. But at Williams Grove and Port Royal on the same weekend, you've got the United Late Model Series. And so what that does, that forces race drivers, teams to choose. It forces fans to choose. And if those two genres pull 5 or 10 teams or pull 100 fans from each other, then that's sales lost.
Right.
So you're not expanding your little sliver of pie, you know what I'm saying? When you work against each other. And if you're a new fan, and that's what I'm hoping my radio show will do, bring in new fans. Well, if they come in and then all of a sudden they're forced to start making decisions, they could get discouraged.
Right.
You know, so it's, what's the old saying? Charity starts at home. We have to clean up our stuff and make sure it's right to get other people to come in.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
It's definitely a divide. We definitely have to work together. You're right.
Yeah.
You mentioned your radio show. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Sure, absolutely. The radio show, it's called On Track with Mike, and it's on 93.7 FM WRGG, which is Greencastle. We're kind of basically here in Greencastle. Your race shop's here in Greencastle. Beth and I live in Greencastle, and so you can tune in 93.7 FM. You can listen to it online anywhere in the world, WRGG.org. I've had people in Nevada, California, Florida, Canada that have tuned in and listened to it. And the last month or so, we've started doing Facebook Live at the same time. So we're doing a simulcast. So if you could imagine getting a live look-in of a radio broadcast, that's what we're doing. And of course, I've had the On Track with Mike title. I've done internet shows and things in the past several years, so finally getting to bring that onto FM radio.
Right.
And I think, you know, we were talking about earlier about, what can we do as far as social media and everything. You know, I think it's, and again, I'm not patting myself on the back. It's just this opportunity presented itself to me that we can get local, regional dirt track and asphalt racing coverage on an FM radio station, and I think that's pretty big. And then this radio station is on the World Wide Web, and they're allowing me to do the Facebook Live.
That's great.
So and you've been on the show a couple of times, and I've had a lot of different drivers on the show, and from late model drivers to sprint car drivers, and I'll tell you a true story. I had Lance DeWeese on the show. Lance DeWeese was one of my first guests on the show. And I've only told Beth this story, so you're the second person to hear this. I sat there, and I remembered I was debating back and forth who I wanted on the show. I said, do I want Lance DeWeese or do I want Greg Hoddett? And I went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the last second, I picked Lance DeWeese. And then what happened to Greg? And I'm happy that I had Lance on the show, but I'm thinking, that was the only opportunity I would have been.
You never know, though.
And so, but I've had sprint car drivers from 410s to 358s, 305s, wingless super sportsmen, crate late model drivers, steel block late models, super lates, micro sprint drivers where you get, you started in didn't start there, but you moved into micro sprints, I guess from what the wedge cars,
The little cyclones.
the cyclones, right? And then you went into micro sprints, and I've had 270, 600 drivers on there. We've even talked about karting, and I've had NASCAR drivers on there. Tony Marakovich, who raced in the Central PA Legend Series, he's raced in the Xfinity Series, and it's interesting. I can sit there, and when you're doing that Facebook Live, you can see who's watching. And I've had anybody from Brian Monteith to Jamie Latham, to drivers in the Xfinity Series, Truck Series. I've had retired Cup Series drivers that are tuning in watching it. And so, this is great. And so I'm hoping that, we can encourage new fans to come, because you know how it is. You have those diehard fans that are always there.
Yep.
That's great. We need them. But we've got to have the new fans to come in to build that sliver of pie again.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's a great
So,
point,
but thanks
too.
for letting me talk about it. It's Tuesday nights. It's on an hour, and it starts at 6 and it goes till 7. And just sometimes I'm going to decide to Saturday or Sunday who I want on, and I'll reach out. And sometimes that person says, "Well, I can't make it," and I make alternate plans. But it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Believe it or not, coming up the first part of May will be a year that I've been on the radio station.
Wow,
in
I
Green
can't
County.
believe
Isn't
that
crazy?
already.
That is crazy.
Oh my
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
great, though.
Yeah, it really is. So, that's from announcing to promoting, PR, writing, and now I'm kind of, doing the radio show and having some fun with it.
That's good.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you. I was really excited when you got that. That was really great.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you were on one night with Alan Saggy. That was one of my first shows.
Yes.
Yeah, and then your work schedule changed where you can't be on, unfortunately, but
Yes.
we'll have to do something.
Yeah.
Just get you back on somehow, some way.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked a lot about the positives about racing, but race can be very tough, a very hard sport. What have been your hardest moments in your career that turned out to be a really great learning experience for you?
Well, I think if you go back to my very early days, and I'm telling my age here because when I started out doing that, and I was working at the newspaper and doing public relations work for Natural Bridge Speedway, there wasn't the internet. There was no internet.
Right.
There was no cell phones. You had a typewriter. If you were lucky, you had one of those old DOS prompt computers, and there was no spell check, there was no grammar check, nothing.
My.
So you literally had to sit there and type out the story, and you yourself had to make sure it was right because it went straight from you straight to the editor.
Right.
And so it had to be right. And in the old days, I could remember typing out press releases on a typewriter, taking them off, folding them up, putting in the mail a stamp, and mailing them out.
Oh my gosh.
And then we got fancy and started faxing stuff, and I remember, because I was hired on at that newspaper because they knew I could write.
Right.
But I can remember, Alyssa, there was, and I won't be too lengthy, but you know me, I like to talk. I'm an announcer,
It's okay.
There was a lady, and I'll never forget her. Her name was Clarabelle Weatherman, and she was like one of the senior editors at this newspaper. And I mean, she had written stories that went into the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal. She had a master's degree in journalism. She knew her stuff.
Right.
And I would sit there and type, and it would go straight to her.
Oh my.
You didn't have that spell check or grammar check. And I mean, you would send your stories over there, and then you would just sit there and you would just cringe, And inevitably, once or twice a week. You'd be sitting there in your little cubicle, and I'd hear her across the room, Mr. Donald. And I'm like, oh my gosh, come here this instant. And I'm like, oh no. And she would do it in front of everybody, all the other reporters, and you'd walk over there and I'll just give you one example of what I'm talking about. I submitted this story one time about, I think it was like a hobby stock race at Natural Bridge Speedway. I'll never forget this, but this is what I went through. There was a driver, his last name was Bowers, B-O-W-E-R-S. He was like a mid-pack to rear of the pack driver.
Right.
All of a sudden, one afternoon, the planets lined up perfectly, and he won, okay? And so that was my big lead story. And she calls Mr. Donald, and she calls me over there, and I get over there, and she says, I don't know how you think you want to write it, but in the racing journalism world, when we say that this was Bowers' first career win, it is not B-O-W-E-R-S apostrophe, it is B-O-W-E-R-S apostrophe as Bowers' first racing career, and I hope you can fix this before you write your next article. And this is what I would go through, okay? And then, as I said, the sports editor was an announcer, a public address announcer. And so when I first got into announcing, I've known him for years, and he's like, now, Michael, you've got to make it sound like you're having fun in the booth. If the crowd does not think you're having fun, they're not going to have fun. And so I started out with those early years. I didn't have those buffers that a lot of today's journalists have. It went straight from me to an editor.
Right.
I had to know it. And by going through that, plus Beth will tell you I'm OCD. So if you start off like that, and then you add OCD, and then 4 years of military into that right there was the learning experience. So all through my career, whenever I'd write an article for a newspaper or a magazine, or would be on a TV show, or I would announce a race or promote, it was boom, 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 boom. Like what we say in the military, dress right, dress. And it came back from those early days.
Right.
When, and I think today's journalists, Alyssa, they've got it so easy.
Yeah.
They just get on the computer, spell check, grammar check, hit email, it's done. We didn't have that back then, and we had to. I remember when I was the public relations director at Natural Bridge Speedway. That's when Natural Bridge Speedway was racing on Friday nights. All we had was what we could mail out, snail mail out to newspapers, put in the local paper, get on the radio and talk about it. And I will never forget, with Whitey Taylor promoting, and I was the public relations director, it was nothing at Natural Bridge Speedway on a Friday night to get 4,000 people, and we had more than 20 late models would show up on a Friday night. Wow. And this is just doing stuff, you know, old school.
Right.
And so sometimes promoters don't realize how easy they have it these days.
Yeah.
You know, but that's the problem, because a lot of promoters, they just throw up a web page and a Facebook page and they think they're a promoter.
But they don't utilize it though.
They don't utilize that, but then I still think there's a degree where you still got to go out there in the community and knock on those doors.
I agree.
And get these people enthused. But no, I didn't want to get too far off, but just going through what I went through early in my career, it really,
that was your learning experience.
that was a learning experience.
Yeah.
And so now you have these tools available that makes it easier.
Right.
Then maybe it makes me be able to maybe excel a little bit, you know, where I wouldn't have maybe. Yeah,
I definitely think people like in my generation don't take advantage of all the good tools that we have. I don't think they use it enough, and they should, because it's easy. I think. I mean, I just have a degree in it. I don't know.
Hey, I think you do a great job, you know, and
it's fun. I like what we do.
Well, you do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, so where do you see your career moving next in the racing industry?
Well, you know, believe it or not, and I know this is crazy, but I know what I'm getting into because I've been around this for 30 plus years. I want to be either a sole or co-team or car owner.
Oh, there you go.
And And right now, I'm working with a Super Cup Stock Car Series team, Jason Shue out of Littlestown. I'm actually going to be the spotter for that team this year. And we're going to travel from Carolina to Pennsylvania to Indiana. We've got a race out in Salem. Of course, Jason's got a lot of NASCAR connections, but you and I talked real briefly about this back during the off season. But eventually, possibly be some type of owner in that Super Cup Stock Car Series team. Now, do I expect I'm going to be up there running up front? No. I'm probably going to be one of those guys like Mr. Bowers, who's the mid or the rear of the pack. But at my age, I'm just here want to have fun.
Right.
And if my car or my team is on a 10th of the budget, and you know how it is to have a budget for a race team, I'm fine. I just want to have fun.
Yeah.
And if it ends up that I can't do something in the Super Cup and I have to end up being the co-owner in a 270 micros, I don't know.
It's still the same thing.
You see what I'm
It's
saying?
Racing.
What's Kenny Wallace say? You know, talking about the parents. Well, I can't afford to have my kid here. I can only afford to have him here. But you're still racing, Kenny Wallace says.
Yep.
So we'll see. I'll keep the radio show going as long as they'll let me do it. And but I want to kind of get in. And like I said, it might not be Super Cup. I kind of like that series, but it may still end up being something in dirt track racing.
Yeah.
As far as announcing, I do have one gig this year. I'm going to announce the ultimate Northeast Super Late Model race at Path Valley Speedway on Friday, August the 9th. So I think there might be a couple more opportunities out there for me to do some announcing at a couple other tracks. I know Path Valley has asked me, and I've had another track or two that's asked me. So I don't know. I do like, I kind of like having weekends free to go to different tracks and not necessarily be tied at one track. So we'll see. We'll see. I guess what they say, to be continued or to be determined, TBD or whatever it's called. Yeah.
I'm sure you'll find something soon.
Yeah. So we'll see. But if not, I'm still happy. So we'll just keep moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I hope I wasn't too lengthy in some of these answers.
No, absolutely not.
We announcers, we love to talk and talk.
That's okay.
I'll tell you, I need to get you like not on the radio show, not just to be a guest, but to interview people. I thought you did a great job. So, and see, it's very rare I'm on this side of it. You made it painless, so thank you.
But anyways, thank you again.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
Anytime. Race fans, make sure you check out Mike Donald. Check out his radio show. I will put all of the information after this video. So make sure to check out the radio show. Bring a friend to the races this year, and I don't know, have fun racing.
Yep. Support your local tracks and
support your
series.
local track. Absolutely.
And your local drivers. There you go. Like Alyssa. Thanks, Alyssa. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you all.